Hello, everyone. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to another episode of the Back of the Pack podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. It is a beautiful Sunday, another race weekend. A lot to talk about today, so let's go ahead and dive right in. Before we do that, as you know, I'm your host, Kyle Walker. This show is brought to you by OKKC Sports, and thank you so much for tuning in. So today was, of course, the Berlin Marathon. Now, as we know, I was not there, although I was originally scheduled to be. But due to injury and lack of training, I have deferred to next year. I know if you've listened to this show before, you've heard me talk about that. But even with me not being there, if you can believe it, the race still went on. They didn't just cancel the whole thing because that one guy from Kansas wasn't going to be there. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with them either. But the race went on, and boy, I wish I had been able to be there because the GOAT, let's just say what it is, the GOAT of marathon running, Eliud Kipchoge, was there. And that guy, if you've not seen him run, then you are just missing a sight to behold, because he is the greatest marathoner in all the world in all time. He now sets a new official marathon record by finishing the Berlin Marathon. And no, I'm not getting this number wrong, in 2 hours, 1 minute and 9 seconds. That is a new world record. And I don't know if there's anyone who is ever going to be able to beat that. Now, I'll say credit where credit is due. The second place winner was not that far behind, but it was certainly no 2:01:09. The previous world record, also set by the same runner, was 2:01:39, and that was on the same course in Berlin a few years ago. So he's the man. He is the GOAT. I bow to his brilliance and excellence, because this guy is just an absolute freak of nature. And what kills me is after he's done running, there's videos now all over the place. He's not breaking a sweat. He's not breathing hard. He doesn't collapse from exhaustion. He hugs his people. He holds up the flag. He does interviews. He was doing photos with other finishers. This guy's ridiculous. And again, 2:01:09, the official finishing time for Kipchoge. Amazing. Just amazing. The women's side went to, I'm gonna kill her name, and I do apologize. Looks like Tigist Assefa. She is from Ethiopia. She sets a new course record with 2 hours, 15 minutes, and 37 seconds. So another world major marathon is in the books, with the Berlin Marathon going down. Kipchoge reigns supreme, a first-time winner in Assefa. So, awesome job by everybody involved. The next one coming up is the London Marathon. That is, I believe, on October 4th. And don't forget that the lottery placement opens on October 1st if you want to try your hand at getting into the London Marathon. But London is the next World Marathon major, followed by Chicago the next week, and then New York in November. So the big ones are coming up. You can definitely tell we're in full-blown fall marathoning season at this point, which it's fun to keep track of and kind of fun to dream of doing some of these just crazy destination races and, running the same course as the elites. It's super amount of fun to think about. So, of course, myself, disappointed in the fact that I wasn't there this year. I'm deferred and looking forward to next year, where I will be at that start line and or finish line come hell or high water. There's going to be no stopping me unless my leg were to actually fall off of my body. I don't foresee that happening. So I plan on being at Berlin next year. So something else I wanted to talk about today, just talking with other runners. I've noticed that right now there is really a lot of disappointment in the running world right now. I know there certainly is for me, both in the running world and, even in things kind of outside of running, things maybe not in our control. But really, a lot of people just kind of disappointed. I will share with you my big disappointment right now. I desperately want the 6 World Marathon majors. Right now I have 2. I have completed the Chicago Marathon and I have completed the New York Marathon. I have deferred Berlin, so that will be number 3. So with any luck, I'll be halfway there. Well, we just opened up the registration for the Boston Marathon. And of course, Boston is number 1 on my list. I will never, ever be fast enough to qualify. I am fully aware of that. I will never be fast enough to qualify. So my only way in is through a charity bib. Well, a few years ago, before the coronavirus hit, I was in contact with one of the Boston charities, and I was trying to get a bib through them. And they said, well, all of our bibs have been assigned already. Apparently, I kind of got into it late in the game. They loved my story. And they said, next time, reapply, you're going to be good to go. So this year, once the charity procedures opened up, I went ahead and submitted my information, told them my story, agreed to raise I put down the minimum amount that they require you to raise for a donation to their charity in order to get the charity bib, that number being $7,500. Again, that's the smallest one. And I sent my information in and I was super excited thinking, okay, they're going to love my story. I've got a podcast. I've had the 2 open heart surgeries. I have kind of a good network of people, a lot of run support, this, that, and the other. And I thought I was going to be a shoo-in. So after a week of just waiting with bated breath, I get the email response back from them. I eagerly open it, only to find I'm on the wait list. I was not accepted on their first go around. And even though I was pretty sure I knew what that meant, I emailed them back. And of course, I wanted clarification, and it was exactly what I thought. So they have X amount of slots. People need to start raising money. And if anywhere in the process between now and January 1st, somebody decides, well, I can't raise that money, or I've hurt myself in training, or whatever the case may be, they start going to the people on the wait list. And that's well and good. And I guess one could argue that I have not been completely rejected, although it certainly feels that way. And let's say that if on January 2nd, there are people who did not raise the money to get the charity bib, yeah, they could go ahead and send me an email and say, hey, are you interested? In which case I'm going to have to say, heck no, I'm not. Because as much as I would love to think I could train for a marathon in that quick of a turnaround and raise that much money directly after the holidays and right before the marathon happens, I know neither of those things are realistic. It's not realistic I could be marathon ready by what I think they're mid-April if I don't learn that I could maybe possibly get into the race until early January. And I certainly don't want to try and tax everybody for money. Hey, anyone want to donate to me? I understand everyone just paid for Christmas and the holidays and this, that, and the other, but go ahead and throw $7,500 my way. It's not realistic. So I have to deal with that disappointment that the Boston charity bib probably not going to happen this year. Actually, no, I'm going to say it's not going to happen this year unless they were to email me next week and say, oh, somebody dropped out. Do you want the spot? Then maybe I got a chance. But that was a big disappointment for me. I know it was a big disappointment for me not to make it into Berlin this year, not to be able to run the race, even though I made it in through the lottery. We've all been dealing with injuries. I had the knee injury that has kind of put me off of my training schedule. People have had other injuries. There have been bad races. We all had to get through this heat wave, and it's still freaking hot around here. I mean, finally, we're cooling off a little bit, maybe getting a little more fall-like. But I know a guy who's going to miss the Kansas City Marathon due to injury. And there's people who are missing races all over just due to injuries. And that kind of stuff adds up. That kind of stuff gets to be really disappointing and can kind of wear just on your overall mental health when it comes to running. Again, running is supposed, let's also not forget, there's the situation going on in Memphis. That's also disappointing to people that, now safety concerns are being raised when it comes to running. And there's just a ton of things that are really affecting the positive mindset that is supposed to come with running. And so we all want to run, and we do run because it helps us. It helps us to feel better about ourselves. It helps with our mental health. It helps with our physical health. All these things are meant to make you feel better. And so when you are getting disappointed and when things are going wrong, then of course it wears on you. And again, it doesn't matter. Maybe you're just going out and your runs just aren't what they should be. Like, geez, man, why are my times, why are they going up? Why are they not coming down? Why am I feeling like I'm taxed earlier on in the race, but then more than I should be? And I should feel okay and still have stamina left and still be able to get to the finish line of that 5K without a walk, or maybe I'm gaining 2 or 3 minutes each time I go out. Those things can all be disappointing. And it's unfortunately something that we've all had to deal with. So I know in previous episodes we had talked about, or at least in one previous episode, we talked about kind of how to bounce back from a disappointing race. But I wanted to just kind of go a little more all-encompassing. How do we bounce back from just overall disappointment, because disappointments, if they're not dealt with, they can compound on each other. Because like that's how I'm feeling right now. The disappointment of not being able to run Berlin today is now compounded by the disappointment of not making the Boston Marathon, which is going to be compounded, I imagine, by also again not making the lottery for London, which is going to be compounded by the next race I run if I don't get the result that I want. And these things all build on top of each other. So let's say that you run a race, okay, and then you have to take 2 weeks off. For argument's sake, you're gonna go on vacation 1 week, and on that vacation you're gonna catch the Rona, and then you're gonna come back and you're gonna want to rest. So you've run a 5K, you're not running again for 3 weeks, and you go out for your first run back, and it's terrible. So not only you have to deal with the disappointment of I ran a race, okay, well then I had to go out of town, and then I missed training, and that is compounded by the fact that my next run did not do well, and now that's compounded by the fact that I have a race that's coming up way too soon that I'm now not ready for. Because we all know if you take any time off of running, it's not like riding a bike. I mean, I guess you still remember how to do it, but you certainly don't do it as well. So then you're compounded by, I've got this race that I'm not going to be ready for, compounded by, oh man, now I'm training too hard. Maybe I hurt myself or my body feels fatigued, compounded by now my big fall race. It wasn't very good because I wasn't prepared or because I couldn't run correctly. And so and then you end up overall just with this huge sense of disappointment, and you blame yourself and you blame your training and you blame the situations that led you to not being able to do things the way you wanted to do. But it leaves this fun hobby that is supposed to be good for our mental health. It leaves you bitter and disappointed and feeling like a failure at times. I know I have certainly at times felt like this gigantic failure because all these little disappointments added up until I eventually was so frustrated and so disappointed in myself that I just feel like this huge overall failure. And so I want to look at a few ways. First, we're going to deal with generic ways of how to deal with disappointment. And then we're going to do a little runner-inspired exercise to make sure that even, yes, while we can feel disappointed, we don't live in that disappointment. Okay, so one of the things here's 5 ways to bounce back from a disappointment, or in this, they call it a setback. And the first one, and this one might be most important, you could argue it is or is not, is be kind to yourself. It's important to address your disappointments, but first you need to take care of you in mind and body. So again, if you are a person who's just going to constantly mentally beat yourself to a bloody pulp when you're disappointed with yourself, then ultimately you're not going to get over your disappointment until you take care of that, until you stop with the self-hatred and the negative self-speak and all those things that we're all insanely guilty of. And I know I am as well. And really, sidebar, that negative self-speak, that will directly affect your running. Okay, we talked about before, if you are feeling bad about your training, or you're feeling bad about a race, or you just wake up some morning and be like, man, I can't do this, or my heart's not in it, or whatever. And if you show up to that start line, you are pretty much already defeated at that point. If you show up at the start line with a lot of negative self-speak in your head, then you're not going to have a good race. Like there's no way you're going to go out there and crush that course. You're not going to feel good after the fact. And as we've talked about, things will compound, build on top of another. And so if you show up already negative and you finish poorly, you have just doubled the negativity in your own brain. So this one says be kind to yourself and address your disappointments, but you have to take care of you in mind and body. The next one is surround yourself with good people. And the more and more I do this podcast, the more and more I understand that to be 100% true. Because now that people have heard this podcast, some of you, and I get to see people at the race, and there's just this sense of positivity, it really does make a big difference. Whether it be the 2 pacers that I've mentioned before, who are both positive influences when I'd come across them at runs, or to running groups that you might be a part of, or to just your running buddy, having the people, the good people that surround you I am learning that it is increasingly more important. Number 3, get your feel good flowing. Okay. And they don't expand on that, but I think it's legit. So what is it that you do that's going to make you feel good on a run? And I'm going to share this with you. And I'm not saying this is right, wrong, or indifference, but here's what I do when I feel just kind of overwhelmed with the disappointment, or just when I'm kind of all up in my own head and in my own feelings. And you might think this is stupid. If you think this is stupid, that's fine. But I know that there are definitely times, and hell, it might be once a month that I do this. I will put on my headphones. I will turn the volume up almost to ear bleeding level. And I will hold my phone in my hand as I leave the house. And I am not going for a run. At this point, I'm going to go on one of my running routes that I know like the back of my hand, that I don't have to think about. And I'm going to take a walk. And when I do, I will keep my phone in my hand so that I can just hit the forward button. If a song comes on and it's just kind of meh, I fast forward past it until I get to one of those songs. And we all have them. Those songs that when they come on, you don't skip them. And they're just the ones that you feel. They're the ones that kind of move your soul, that really can stir up your feelings, both good feelings, bad feelings, positive, negative, whatever you want to call it. And I will just go on what I guess what others would probably say is just an angry, emotional walk. And I will be, because I have headphones on. I'm not trying to scare the whole neighborhood, but I will pretty much be lip syncing, shall we say, at the top of my lungs. You know how it is, where you would be belting it out in full force, if there weren't people who are going to hear you and be frightened and possibly call the police. So I am aggressively singing in my head, shall we say. You can even throw in a little hop on a downbeat of a song. You can throw in that fist pump. You can throw some horns if this thing is rocking, but just take that walk and just kind of let your emotions leave and exit you while you are just jamming out to your tunes on a walk that doesn't mean anything. Don't even turn on your Strava. Don't turn on Map My Run. Don't turn on Nike Run Club. Don't turn on any of that stuff. Just go for a walk. And you know what? Just let it out. Just let all the negativity out. For me, it's through music. Some people might just want to go and kick a tree, whatever. Do you. But that is one of the things I do. And I always feel when I get back that I'm just like, whew, okay, I feel better. But then again, I'm a very musical person. Like music, I'm one of those people. Music speaks to me. I'm of that generation where I didn't have apps and I didn't have 11 billion channels on TV. I had a radio when I was a kid and I listened to music. So music is my big thing, and music is what can really get me fired up. It can get my heart to sing, get my soul, whatever the case might be. Again, I'm lacking words right now. I just watched my Chiefs get killed. Not killed, but they lost, and it was pathetic. So I know, and I might have to go for an angry walk after I'm done recording. It's definitely possible. So anyway, I digress. That is just my example of get your feel good flowing. What does that look like to you? How do you get your feel good flowing? And again, it's got to be something that's going to make you ultimately feel good. Again, I am releasing my stress and anger through that angry walk. But how is it you're going to feel good? I feel good after the fact, but how are you going to feel good? Number 4, take everything as a learning experience. And that's kind of a no duh. Same with the one we did earlier about a disappointing race. Well, even with disappointment overall, take it all as a learning experience. And we're going to circle back to that here in a little bit. And then number 5 on this list is get back in the game. So let's say that you did have a good race, went on vacation, got the Rona, took the time off, your run sucked, things aren't working out well. Does that just mean you quit? No. That doesn't mean you just quit. You don't pack it up. You don't throw away your running shoes. You don't say, I'm never doing this again. Now you know your situation. So now it's time to get back in the game. It's time to get back to your training. It's time to get back on your schedule. Time to get back to your regular runs, get to your run group, get to the races that you know and love. Whatever it looks like for you, get on your elliptical at home. Whatever it looks like for you, get back on it. It's so much easier to maintain when you're already at a good place running than starting over. Anytime you miss enough time and you kind of feel like you're starting over, you got to do it all over again. You have to get to that good spot you were at again, even though you're already there, but now you're back at square one. So you know what? Work on maintaining. And if you do have to start over, or if you kind of have to start in the middle, if you have to work on your progress, then do it. And just get a positive mindset about it. Just be grateful for the opportunity. Be grateful that, hey, I can still do this. I just haven't done it for a minute. And I'm going to need to work on it. I've got to work a little harder now to get back to where I was. But be grateful that you even have the opportunity. So here's some other ones I found. One of it, and some of these are going to be a little repetitive. They're just worded differently. Allow yourself to feel disappointed. Okay. So, I've done that. I'm disappointed in Berlin. Okay. I've acknowledged that. I'm disappointed in Boston. Yep. Yep. Okay. I've allowed myself to be disappointed. So, what I did on today that was supposed to be the Berlin Marathon for me, even though it was run, but I wasn't there. I went out and did a 10K this morning because, I've been able to do local races. I did a 10K this morning and I actually somehow didn't know it until I was done with the race. I got a PR. So I have a new personal record for 10K. It came 8 years after my previous personal record for a 10K. So that's good, right? Like, I allowed myself to feel disappointed, but it's not like I stopped running just because I couldn't do Berlin. I wasn't going to do anything. No, that was never an option. So I signed up. I did the Great Plains 10K and I came up with a personal record. So go team. This list here has what I talked about just a minute ago. It says, let it out. And I agree. Let it out, whatever your outlet is. Now, please try and make it a healthy one. Don't go out on a bender. I don't recommend that strategy, but let it out. You're allowed to feel your feelings. You're allowed to be upset at a race or an injury or a situation or, someone you used to train with who now doesn't train with you anymore, or whatever your situation is. You are allowed to be upset about it. Let it out. Don't live in it. The next one, don't dwell on what might have been. Now, this is a big one for me because, of course, as I sit here right now, I think I should be in Berlin recovering from a marathon and probably getting ready to limp down the road to dinner where I could have all the beers that I wanted. No, not going to do that. So don't dwell on what might have been. Next one, be kind to yourself. Self-explanatory. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself some credit. All right. And that's what people have told me about the Berlin situation. Give myself some credit. I knew the situation was going to be bad. I knew I wasn't going to be able to train the way that I wanted. So I deferred rather than trying to gut it out, rather than going for a bad experience, moved it to next year where hopefully the experience will be better. Same thing for you. Give yourself some credit. If you're coming back from injury, give yourself credit for coming back from injury. Some people just quit. If you had a bad race and you want to go back and try again, give yourself credit. Some people would just walk away. You want to see improvement. So please give yourself credit. The next one is put things into perspective. We're going to kind of circle back around to that. And then the last one on this, it says, look for silver lining. And again, we're going to circle back to something like that. So what I found, and this comes from... it's called Outside. It's a women's running magazine / website. And they've listed something I thought was interesting. It deals with disappointment. And what they title it here is it's not all bad. It's not all good. And it's the art of balancing conflicting emotions. It says practice holding two seemingly incompatible emotions at the same time and balancing them to break out of feeling like a situation is all or nothing. And so they kind of explain what this is. But what I like is it's kind of a conversation that you're going to have with yourself. And you could even write it down and do a fill in the blank if you wanted to on this. And the first one is, well, the bad news is blank. And number two, but the good news is blank. And so for whatever your situation is, I feel like we could pretty much answer this. We could come up with answers to these, and that will help your mindset of holding both good and bad, but not just dwelling on the bad. Okay, so again, well, the bad news is I didn't get to run Berlin today. But the good news is I ran a 10K PR. Okay, well, the bad news is I didn't get a charity bib to the Boston Marathon. Well, the good news is, and again, I'm working on that part, maybe then I will have the time and money to go do a different race I wanted to do. Maybe next year in the spring, I go do Little Rock. Or maybe I, over the summertime, get real crazy and go do Anchorage, Alaska, okay, which I would not have had money to do if I had the Boston Marathon to take care of. So you can always find this. You can figure out a way to carry both of these emotions and balance them out. Let's see. Let's try and think of other ones. Okay. Well, the bad news is that I have a knee injury, okay? But the good news is, and you could think of a ton of things, the good news is, I'm going to take some much needed time off. Or the good news is I'm going to take up biking because it doesn't hurt my knee and I can continue to be in shape. Or the good news is I went out and bought an elliptical because it's no impact training. So now I have the elliptical I always wanted. Or the good news is I didn't really have the money to go to that race anyway. So now I can either defer or just bow out of it and save myself some money. Okay. And you can do all of this just revolving around something like a knee injury. What are some other things we've been ticked off about? Oh, yeah, perfect. Okay, here we go. All right. So the bad news is, and this is a few weeks ago for me, I didn't run the Plaza 10K in as fast as I wanted. The good news is I met a really cool pacer who I get to say hello with at all the races. Okay. I mean, there's a good one right there. Another running resource for myself. And she's a much better runner than I am. So I have a running resource of someone who is better than me and whose brain I can pick. And she listens to the show. So that just makes her like double awesome. I like this. This to me is the right kind of way of dealing with disappointment. You're acknowledging the disappointment and then immediately turning it around and, like the other one said, looking for that silver lining or just, looking for the good in a situation. And I think even beyond running, we can take this exercise and apply it to so many things in life. Okay, so many. All right, let's try it again. Well, the bad news is the Chiefs got beat today by a team that was not as good as them. That was the bad news. The good news is I'm going to have plenty to talk about on the Red Kingdom Reaper podcast that I'll be recording in a few days. Plenty to talk about. See, this all works. So that's kind of where I wanted to land on the disappointment aspect. And again, I know this is similar to a previous episode, but that was just talking about one race. This is overall disappointment. And we're all functioning adults here. We all have to deal with things that disappoint us or let us down or bewilder our common sense, because there's a lot of that in the world. And so it's good to have ways to deal with it. So go through the steps that we've mentioned in this episode. Please just acknowledge it, understand it, process it, but don't live in it. All right. And those are the big ones. And then here, go ahead, list the bad, but then you got to find the good. All right. And if you guys want to talk about this further on a different episode, give me some of your bads. We will all find the good in it, because you can almost always find the good in a situation. I said almost always. Please don't send me like the most terrible situations ever conjured by your mind. I don't want to get that in depth on it. But in the running world, you can normally find a good out of a bad situation. So what's good is that we're finally getting into fall. What's really good is the heat is slowly starting to go away and we are in for some beautiful weather. We've told you guys, again, we're gonna go ahead and put a pin in that subject for today. But I told everyone we will be at the Garmin Kansas City Marathon Expo. Absolutely going to happen. We're going to be there. And by the time this episode airs, you are going to see the pre-orders available for the t-shirts that we will be offering at the expo. Please let us know your shirt and your size. Go ahead and get it prepaid for. Then all you have to do is pick it up at the expo. Boom, done. Beautiful thing. So go ahead and take advantage of that once it is posted, and that should be available by the time this episode airs. So we're going to be back next week as we are getting ramped up for the Garmin Kansas City Marathon. We are going to have a couple interviews heading your way, so those will be fun. There's going to be some people you probably know that are going to come on the show and talk about it. And then we are just dead heading towards Garmin, and that's going to get us into mid-October. And that's going to actually be getting us close to the end of the fall running season, but we've still got some more tricks up our sleeves. So go ahead and stay with us. Last thing I want to address, I saw that our listens from last week were way down. Maybe I just was not very entertaining. If that's the case, I do apologize. But as always, this show only grows if you guys help it out. So please like, share, subscribe, rate, star, review, tell your friends, post it on social media, share it. Every click you make in benefit of this show helps. It is all wonderful and it is all so greatly appreciated. So I wanted to pass that on. Anything you guys do to help share this show and to spread the word, I thank you all so very much. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Back of the Pack podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. I am your host, Kyle Walker. This show is brought to you by OKKC Sports and is produced by Katie O'Neill. We'll be back next week. Everyone have a great week of training. Hopefully your races went well this week, and we'll see you next time.